Hello everyone, welcome back to Tackled Edges. I'm your host Camilla, and today we are back with another episode. I am so excited about this one, guys. We are going to be talking about a very long book today, but a very interesting one. So today we're going to be talking about To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. Now this I am very excited about because I remember starting this book a long time ago, approximately 3.5 years ago. Over the summer, at summer camp, someone lent me this book, and I was like, wow, this cover is amazing. They say don't judge a book by its cover, but it's definitely a big part of it. I love the cover. It was so beautiful and captivating, but I started, I got 100 pages in, maybe. Mind you, this is an 800-page book, so I never really had the time to finish it, and then I had to return it to my friend, and we had to leave, and then, I kind of forgot about it for a while, but then I saw it again at my school library, and I knew I had to finish it, because I was like, there's no way I can just let an interesting book with an interesting hook and a beautiful cover just slip me by like that. So I finished it before school ended, so I avoided any late fines, thank God. But anyways, life has a funny way of coming around full circle like that. I started my high school career with this book, I ended it with this book, and, I have some mixed feelings, I have some great thoughts, so let's jump into it. Now, I actually don't have the book on hand with me right now, so I won't be able to pull directly from it like I did last episode, which is something that I really liked, and I will try to start incorporating more into my episodes because I think it really gives you a feel for the style, the different writing styles that authors have, but also the vibe of the book and the characters and the different voices of the narrator. So I think that's really interesting, and I will try to do that more often. But for now, I'm going off my brain. So this book starts very interestingly with a woman named Kira Navarez, and she is a xenobiologist, and this is very preemptively just want to warn you guys, this is a very quintessentially sci-fi book. Not so much science incorporated into it, although there is quite a bit of just references to the world that we're crafting. But again, quintessentially science fiction setting where we have this advanced human civilization. We've expanded to the stars. Very interesting setup of you kind of get an idea of where everything is in relation to each other. Anyway, so in this advanced civilization where humanity has expanded past not past the Milky Way, but past the solar system, into a bunch of different terraformed colonies, and we have this woman, Kira, who is a xenobiologist, and she works for this company where they go and survey, and she works with a team of others who are various scientists of different kinds, like geologists and etc. But she looks for foreign life forms, and they go and survey foreign planets and other systems to see if they are eligible to be terraformed, make sure it's safe potentially for humans to come, and see if it's the right, proportions for life to potentially inhabit there. And so the story begins at the end of their mission. And so she is there with her fiance, Alan. And we learn that they are really in love with each other. They have kind of found their person, you know what I mean? And they are on this survey mission. They're finally together because their jobs are tricky. They get put on different missions, and so they're not always around each other, and they spend long stints away from each other. And obviously she's away from her family who live on a solar system called Wayland. And all this is just kind of important setup for when I talk about the book later. So this survey team, Kira's survey team, is celebrating the end of their mission, and then all of a sudden they just find a little blip on the radar, and they think they're done. They're kind of packing up to leave and go to their respective homes. Kira's boyfriend proposes to her, and I don't know why my voice did that just now, but it's just this moment of intense happiness for Kira. It's just satisfaction. Her mission's completed, all this, and then there is this one moment, this blip on the radar, and then it all kind of comes crumbling down from there. Anyway, so her and this other woman on her team, they are assigned to just go out, check it out. It's a faint biological reading. No one really knows what it is, but they still have to go check it out before they can really sign off on this mission. She's like, I've combed through every rock on this planet. There's nothing here, nothing interesting whatsoever. And so she's like, this could not be possibly much. So they go, and she finds, long story short, she falls into and finds this alien antechamber. And this is huge. This is significant because up until now, humanity has actually uncovered one piece of evidence for alien life or sentient alien life. They have other forms of life on like other planets. They've kind of figured that out, but nothing so complex to rival humanity. But they do have this one thing on this like system planet really far from the rest of civilized space called the Great Beacon, and it's just this like homing signal that kind of is powered by these little machine biological uncertain, and it just sends out signals. And so they call it the Great Beacon, and everyone's kind of confused as to what creatures made this. But they know they're aliens and they know they are intelligent. They just don't know if they're still here, if they're long gone, whatever. So this is huge. This is like a real alien artifact that she just found. And so she's thinking a million things. Obviously, not only is this going to make her uber famous, but also has a dozen of implications, because obviously she's a biologist, she's a xenobiologist, she knows a lot about the regulations for alien containment, all that kind of jazz. But anyway, so she falls in, she's a little bit nervous, naturally, and then she finds this basin. And in this basin, there is this coalescing dust. Uncertain about the properties, but she knows not supposed to touch it. She's not supposed to touch it. But anyway, somehow it crawls out of the basin, and she touches it by accident, on purpose, uncertain. And it basically attaches itself to her. She cannot get it off. It's stuck to her. And long story short, a lot of stuff happens, but she is irrevocably intertwined with this parasitic organism. They call it a xeno throughout this book, so that's what I'll call it. Obviously, uncertain whether it is a biological suit, a technological suit, nanomachines, all that sort of stuff. At least in the beginning, we don't know. And so that's the premise of this book. And also, oh, by the way, actually, no, I won't spoil that. But I will say that shortly after, she discovers just how dangerous this suit can be. And so from then on, she regards it as a weapon. And also, naturally, she is contained by the military and taken in for testing. This is kind of a side note, but I always sort of wonder about this. I mean, if someone really were to have true state-of-the-art superpowers and they were just born with them and whatever, they would just get wiped off the face of the earth so fast. Like, they would disappear. The government would just snap them up and do so many, like, abominable tests on them. And it makes me really sad, because I feel like we as a species are very limiting to ourselves about, like, we're very risk assessing people, you know what I mean? We think of things in terms of what could be good or bad, or what could have a positive or negative outcome. And that's not entirely wrong, I would say. Like, obviously you need precautions because of unprecedented measures. But I feel like sometimes we just need to let incredible, exceptional, supernatural things just be. And I think maybe we would be better off for it. I think we meddle too much. But anyway, that's just random take. I feel like maybe some precautions are justified. Just maybe not all of them. I don't know. Anyway, moving on. A main concern that I have with a lot of my podcast episodes is I don't want it to come across as like a book report. I'm not talking about necessarily just the plot. I'm talking about what makes this book interesting, what makes it unique, and what really drew me to it, what I liked about it, what I didn't like. And sometimes that does involve me. Obviously, I have to set up the plot, but it involves me kind of going into the plot a little bit. But this book is so long and so, like, twisty-turny that I don't think that would be really beneficial here. So I'm going to do my best to talk about this as a work as a whole. Now, obviously, this is a very interesting hook. I think, naturally, iterations of it have been very done before, this alien infection, that kind of thing, but it's just this concept that is the suit that is mysterious. We don't know what it is. It's not like necessarily a biological organism, but definitely a indicator of sentient alien life. That I think is super interesting. And so I think not only do we have an interesting hook right off the bat, but we also have this like knowledge that when you go into a long book, you know that there's got to be a lot of meat in the middle, you know what I mean? And sometimes there's like this worry that rather than being an entirely productive middle section, it starts to drag on a little bit for the sake of just length. And I think that that is a qualm that I could definitely see some people having with this book, because there does seem to be a lot of like little deviations in the larger story arc that don't necessarily need to be there. There's a lot of like action, not necessarily unnecessary battles, but I feel like it seems a little bit too much at times. But I honestly, just because I was getting through it at such a quick pace, it didn't really feel like it dragged on for too long because it wasn't like I was stretching this book out like I have with some other longer books over weeks. But this was a very concentrated amount of time that I read this in, so it didn't really feel too long. It didn't feel too much of a slog to get through, which I will give props to Paolini for because I know that this was like a big project of his since he wrote the Aragon series, which I actually haven't read. So I don't know how this holds up against that. But I would comment that it didn't feel too long, but it definitely could. I could see how it would feel long. But moving on, one of my favorite parts about this book is not really the conflict with the aliens, because I found that to be maybe another nitpick I would have. I think it does feel a little odd. I like how the aliens were formulated, but I think it could have gone deeper. You know what I mean? I feel like there were so many opportunities because Kira, spoiler, is the only one who can communicate with these invading aliens who invade shortly after she bonds with this Xeno. They invade shortly after. They're called by the humans jellies, but their real name is the Ranawi. And I also didn't like the nickname jellies. Like I feel like that's a very human thing to take something like a complex organism and just kind of dumb it down to like to something so infantile like a jelly. I don't know. I didn't really like that, but it does kind of scream something that our human race would do. Anyway, but as I was saying, Kira has this opportunity to uncover just an incredible like a wealth of knowledge and going deeper into the Jelly Society or the Ronawi Society, whatever. And also, as we learn more about the other sentient beings that have inhabited this universe over the ages, over the millennia, we just get snippets. And I feel like even though yes, we're learning as Kira goes and we're learning as time goes on, once we reach a certain point of, okay, we have this knowledge at our disposal, when we have someone who can get it for us, and I know everything is very like life or death, whatever, 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 and I know there's meant to be more books in the series, but honestly, I feel like it could have just been a standalone. Like, the idea of reading more almost like feels almost overwhelming, and it feels like it's dragging this arc on a little bit too long. But anyway, yes, I want to know more about the Jelly Society. I want to know, once you get into their computers, once you can communicate with part of them, why am I not getting more dynamics? Why am I feeling like there's not that many interpersonal relationships between these organisms? And I think that that is my one nitpick. I think, yes, you have this like advanced society that, albeit is kind of parasitic, they kind of took over the technology of those that came before them, which is also kind of odd. But civilizations as a whole, I believe, regardless of alien race, once you have language, they become inherently social. And if you don't really have social structures beyond just hierarchy, if you don't have any interpersonal relationships between the creatures of that civilization, even if it's alien, I feel like that makes it a little bit shallow because a hierarchy is easy to define, but we have that in our human society. We have people in higher positions of power, people in less positions of power. We have socioeconomic status, whatever, class divides. But that's not what makes our human society meaningful. That's not what makes each person meaningful. What makes each person meaningful is their personality, is their relationships between other people. And I think that in an alien society that is meant to be sentient, even if it's like a little bit rudimentary, they're very like kill, 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 go, go, go. Not super logical. If you were showing me that they have the ability to rebel against each other and form different factions, that tells me that they should have more depth of relationship, and I wish I got a little bit more of that. But I digress. Another thing that, rather than actually being a qualm, something that I actually really liked about this book is the sort of concept of a motley crew. Like, we have this band, this ragtag band of characters that I think make for a pretty vibrant cast. I really like them, and I think they play off of Kira well. I think, it's a little tropey. Like, obviously, you're going to have an interesting group of characters to kind of surround the main character, but I did like it. I think it was done well. I think these characters are likable. And I must say, there was no one character that I was like, oh man, I really wish they didn't exist. Um, And they really cared for each other. And regardless of how well I think characters are written, when you have a dynamic that just really cares for each other, like a found family, I have a soft spot for that. And I think it's really nice. It was really nice to see. And I really liked it. I will say, I thought it was odd a little bit. Not maybe not odd, but I think Kira being forgiven so many times, that's also a very human thing. Like, I understand. Like, you don't want to completely outcast someone, especially if it's not in her control. And I think some people had a qualm with that. I will admit, before I make these episodes, I kind of look at other people's opinions a little bit and see where they are in the book just so I can comment on it. Because my personal opinion, I actually really enjoyed the book, and I think the characters had a lot to do with it. Everyone was very motivated, very driven, and honestly, I enjoyed seeing people do things just for the sake of uncovering knowledge and just for the sake of it being a once in a lifetime thing, like an incredible thing that no other human could dream of experiencing. And obviously, there's this whole war, there's this big crisis that is making the impending doom of humanity seem closer than ever. So obviously, everything is very high risk, and you don't really have any reason to be turning down risk at this point because you're trying to better humanity, you're trying to save humanity. So that I get. But also there was just this gist that I got of the crew being very inclined to seek knowledge and to learn more and to follow Kira to the ends of the earth just because she's unique and she's different and she could be the key to saving everyone. But also just for the sake of it, And that's what I really liked, because some people might call that unrealistic, but I get it. These are outlaws in a sense. These are smugglers. These are people who just kind of found their way towards each other and became family. And they just want to know what's up, They just want to find. They're so intrigued by this whole situation and they are aware of the danger. I like that. But they're brave. And I thought that was a very interesting dynamic. And I just enjoyed it. I think it's a very pleasant dynamic to read. But yes, back to my earlier point, I do think that sometimes Kira made like really bad decisions. And it wasn't just her, it was some others in the crew. And it just kind of gives you the impression that they're just mistakes being made to like push the plot further. So I don't know. That was what I would say kind of grated on my nerves a little bit. Like, I think they could have also, to give a specific example, I think they could have treated Grigorovich a little bit better, because there was this whole like thing where he had a meltdown and didn't start working, and it was so preventable. It was so preventable. And yes, I know it was to develop Kira's connection with the Xeno and to like showcase the soft blade or the seed or whatever, to showcase its prowess and their growing connection and her growing command over it, and it's showcased really the might of its power. So I understand why it was there. It just felt like it was just such a preventable situation that was just carelessness, and maybe that's something that happens to humans under stress, and I agree, maybe that is more realistic, but it just felt so preventable and it felt a little bit forced. And that just happened time and time again, so it got a little bit tiring to me, because they should have really made better decisions sometimes, and it really didn't make sense to me why they were making so many mistakes. And the continual forgiveness was a little bit tough at times, but I will say maybe the forgiveness was a part of what made the humanity in these characters shine, because that's what people do. We forgive and we forgive and we forgive and we forgive until we have nothing left to give, which Loki was a bar. You guys should give me credit for that one. But overall, I enjoyed the characters. I thought they were cool, and I thought that they responded very nicely to the overall situation that they were in, even if they did make a lot of sort of author forced mistakes. And Kira, I wish, she's like an interesting character because she doesn't have all that much depth, but you do kind of get to know her and you realize like she's just like a person in a very horrific, odd situation that you don't really know how anyone would respond to that. So I understand why they didn't necessarily take too much time to flesh out her character in a more intricate, mundane sense, which I enjoy seeing, but I understand why they didn't, because it's just a person responding to an extraneous outlier situation in honestly a pretty good way. Like, she didn't like handle it as horribly as some other people would have. So it was cool to see someone start in this abysmal, horrifying position and then just slowly find her peace and sort of meld with the organism and form the symbiotic relationship. And I think that culminated nicely in the ending, because it was just like the ultimate synthesis and the ultimate kind of atonement for sins, and realization of higher purpose, I would say, within the situation. I will also say, I really don't want to spoil the ending, but I want to comment on the nature of the ending. Um, this idea that someone, like a character, becomes this like sacrificial, like they have this sacrificial mentality, but they also become something more than human, something more than they were initially, something almost like godlike in this world. Um, that in the book's world, and I've seen this done twice, I think, in just what I've read, and oddly enough, I don't hate it. I think it's a very interesting way to wrap things up. This also happened in Mistborn, I believe. And the idea that a beloved character can sort of achieve this level of transcendence. And in Mistborn, it was Sazed, which was not the main character, but in a sense, sort of was by the end. And in this book, it's Kira. It's just an interesting. It almost seems like a retcon, but it's sort of not because it really did make some kind of sense within the world that the author created. So I think that is a very tricky conclusion to work your way up into. So I give them props for actually being able to pull it off in a way that made sense. I will say it is a little bit of a sticky ending to me. Like it's a very like tie it up in a bow, but still leave like a little bit of uncertainty. You know what I mean? Like and feel the sacrificial like sort of I don't know. There was something about this ending in this book specifically that left a different taste in my mouth than in Mistborn. Because in Mistborn, I think it made a little bit more sense. Here, I don't know. I think it was an interesting. I enjoyed reading it because it offers a lot of, without being too explicit as to what it is, offers a lot of opportunities for description and just creative liberty. So I like that, intriguing to me. But will say, I don't know if Kira is exactly the kind of person who I would like entrust this with. It almost seems like at the end she became this like benevolent like being of peace and harbinger of unity, and I don't know. I think everything that led up to that moment, obviously she wanted peace, but it didn't seem ingrained in her character. It didn't seem like she's not the high and mighty benevolent type. And it almost seemed like she transformed into a different character by then, which I understand because there was a lot of trauma, but maybe it just wasn't imparted onto me as strongly as I would have expected. Another interesting point that I think you cannot talk about this book without hitting is the corrupted, or the nightmares as well. This to me was one of the more alluring points of the book because, in a sense, I feel like it could have been okay without it, but at the same time, it was really the linchpin that drove the plot. Because the jellies alone, it's more of an us versus them kind of book then, but this was what made it more complex. It added a layer. And I think the reveal of what they actually were and how it went about was done quite nicely because it gives you this, you have this like inkling of suspicion in the back of your mind, and then it's confirmed, and it just is done very cinematically, and I think I really enjoyed that. It's not this most unpredictable thing, but it's also enough of a big revelation that it seems very dramatic, and I enjoyed that. I also thought that it was a little bit obviously for sci-fi you suspend your disbelief, but this felt like a little bit unrealistic in the scope of what we know about this world. It felt almost too perfect of an antagonist. But it did tie in really well with the discovery of the soft blade's true purpose, but also having an antithesis that paralleled it in an antagonizing kind of way. And I thought that was really interesting because on one hand you have this growth that is good, but you also have malignant growth, similar to like a cancer. And in my mind, the timeline didn't really make sense because it felt too rapid, and it felt like how did they really, from the time that the inception occurred to the time that, they actually started appearing, was it that fast of an evolution? But the book actually explained it pretty well, and I think that was not really too much of a pinch point for me because I really did enjoy the idea of having this like illogical entity that is just haunting both groups, and it complicates the war, and it made it more interesting, and I think the book would not have been complete without it. Alternatively, I did think that in some of the action scenes, the battle scenes, honestly, it got a little bit muddy because it was just a lot of mayhem, which it's supposed to be, but I don't know, maybe it got a bit superfluous for me at times. But again, I did enjoy this element. I thought it was really interesting. I think doesn't again, maybe I will say this book I enjoyed, and it didn't seem like too much for me. I liked all the elements. I think it came together pretty nicely. However, I don't think this needs to be a series. As much as I love the characters, I feel like I squeezed enough out of them. You know what I mean? There's not more that I was left wanting. It almost seemed like she embarked on this quest on her own at the end. I didn't think that was necessary. I don't think it was a necessary thing to add. I know that the idea that there's like this malignant force that can be wiped out, so like in like this bow, again, the retcon thing, unrealistic, but also I didn't need the extra at the end. I didn't need the clear segue into a second book. I didn't need that at all. Oh, another thing I did want to talk about was the entropists. I think they are so cool. I think that was a very interesting component to add to this. Again, I think one of my favorite parts of this book was the ship mind thing, the idea that, you know, it was interesting to me that the aliens, when they first saw humans, they called them two forms. And at first, Kira was like, okay, they think male and female, but they actually meant the humans and the ship minds. Because this is a very, like, interesting piece of lore where all of these advances that humanity has made kind of make sense in the realm of sci-fi. Like, okay, advancements of technology, they can go faster than the speed of light, yada yada yada, they're terraforming planets. That's very standard thing stuff. But I think the idea that you could have these like ship minds that are just human, that once had a body that elected to be enhanced to the point where they're just a brain and control a ship and just have this infinite amount of knowledge but no body with which to channel it through, that is so interesting to me. And I think, again, like I said before, I think his character, this idea could have been fleshed out more rather than just this like traumatized brain. I think it could have been more, like his personality could have shown more, you know what I mean? And every time Kira would talk with Grigorovich, I expected a more robust conversation. But every time it was kind of like she was blocking him out. And I was like, there's so much opportunity here for interesting conversations that she can't have with anyone else. But I just didn't get it. Same with the entropists. I think their hive mind was such a beautiful like execution of that. I think it was really interesting. They're like just this. I don't understand the whole like fanaticism aspect of their personalities though, because obviously they have access to some of the most state of the art, incredible science. They're so cool. Like everything that they talk about is just the idea that this technologically advanced world has this subsect of people that is so even beyond technologically advanced is so cool to me. However, it just doesn't, this idea that they're like trying to prevent the heat death of the universe or whatever, and they're just also simultaneously just seeking knowledge, that's like their main thing. That doesn't make sense to me at all, because it seems like with such interesting, intriguing, knowledge-seeking people that I feel like there is a clear personality incongruence there, or at least they're not two traits that I associate with each other. So I didn't really understand that. But anyway, I thought they were so interesting and really, I don't know, maybe their personalities weren't super fleshed out, but I thought they were so cool and just they're the kind of characters that are clear side characters, but you root for them. I wanted to see them on every page because I wanted to know more about their technology and their motivations and, you know, what really, because they're humans. They're slightly odd humans, but they're humans, and I think that could have really been explored more. I don't know. I wish I'd seen a little more depth in the characters because there's so much length to the book. You have so much time to flesh it out, but instead we got kind of long montages of hypnosis and training and that kind of thing. I don't know. I think there was too much focus on Kira, but not enough focus on what actually made Kira Kira, and that same logic applied to the rest of the cast. There was more focus on the overall, but not enough on just the intricacies of their lives. And I don't know. I think that's a very hard thing to achieve as an author, and I feel like I've been writing a book. It would be very hard for me to do that as well. So I know that's a really difficult nitpick to make, but I feel like it's just something I wished I had seen more of. Overall, as far as sci-fi goes, I think there's just this richness of concept that I really appreciated, because I think a lot of sci-fi often goes into like, it's often from like a teenage lens, I would say. Actually, it's a very like academy oriented, like sort of militaristic, like there's a rebel in this scientifically, technologically advanced space world. And I don't know, I think this was a little bit more about what happens to someone who gets ensnarled in something far grander than themselves. And I know that's like a common sci-fi thing, but also this really felt like someone small in a big, big world. And I enjoyed that. I think that was really interesting. It wasn't too intricate of a world where it made you feel like, wow, humanity is so far from what we have now. It just felt like what we have now, but on a grander scale, on a galactic scale. It even had the like Earth elitism, but I kind of understand that in a sense. But yes, it was far removed, but not far removed enough that the society was completely unrecognizable, which I thought was very interesting. Because in other books, Red Rising, which is another book I'm actually even more excited to talk about than this one, coming up soon, that is a sci-fi world that completely unrecognizable, but so captivating. That one I really liked. This one, a little bit more realistic, a little bit more tame, but the characters in it, that's why I really enjoyed this book. I think the plot was good as well. There was a lot of, it was like an action sci-fi, I would say, a lot of like fight scenes, a lot of international relations, I almost said, but like interspecies relations. I thought that was interesting. I wish I just had seen more of that political intrigue, but that's not everyone's cup of tea either. So I don't know. My personal opinion. Overall, I really like this book. I think there's just so much little lore that I could go into, which makes it so exciting for me to talk about. I know I kind of nitpicked a lot in this episode, but it was really just because I'm trying to give you an overarching idea of the feeling that this book gave me. And it did give me this idea of wanting more in the moment, you know what I mean? But I really did enjoy the way the story progressed. I think I liked the periods of time when they were just sitting around talking to each other and really understanding each other and getting to know more about each other in this crisis-like world. I think that's always a great plot point. I also liked learning about the aliens and the technology, and also this idea that there's an entire, I didn't even bring up the Vanished in this episode, but I think that's something that you kind of understand more and more as you read the book, and that's something you kind of need to uncover for yourselves, but super cool too. And I think I'll leave you with also this. The Staff of Blue, I think that plot point, a little bit unnecessary. I wish I had gotten more out of it, but I also understand that sometimes you need a red herring in your plot. You need something that you waste an abnormal amount of time on that makes the stakes even higher because you know that it was just a disastrous mission. So sometimes there's some merit to that, which I really appreciate, but also I think it was just a little bit too much. Like it sidetracked the plot, I think. But it did give you an idea of the grandeur of the Vanished, which I do think was necessary. And I appreciate it because we really don't know much about them. And I assume in the future parts of this series that will be further explored. I don't know if I'm going to read them, or at least not for a few years. But mixed emotions on that one. Oh, also, Kira's relationship with Falcone. Sorry for the spoiler, but, it kind of gets obvious. It's not a super integral point of the plot either, but honestly, I want to say, I am assuming very few people who are listening to this have actually read the book yet, but the whole time, for some reason, I thought she was like flirting with Vishal, and I don't understand why I thought this, but now I realized I was very wrong, and obviously she's gonna get with the captain, that's the trope. Obviously you're gonna get with the misunderstood brooding captain. Obviously, fine, I get it, but I seriously thought she had something going on with the doctor. But I'm glad the doctor got his happy ending too. Happy for that. Yeah, I don't know, I thought it was kind of weird. I thought Falcone was a very, very I don't know, a middle-aged man, and I saw Kira as more in her 20s, 30s, I don't know, but regardless, doesn't matter. It was expected, as expected. Yeah, okay, I think if you're looking for an interesting book, a really quintessentially sci-fi book, something that doesn't really suspend your disbelief too much, makes you really, brings you along for a ride, something new, something fresh, something exciting, this idea that Trig, I think the character, I love Trig, he captured it perfectly, this excitement about aliens, that's what you get, because all the others, they seem very doomsday, but also they're discovering alien civilizations. How cool is that? That's kind of the vibe I get from this book at certain points of it. Sometimes, I understand, have certain qualms with it, whatever, say what you will, but really, at its core, this was just a fun sci-fi, a lot of emotions, but obviously, something that I really missed, this idea that you can just explore the stars and come and understand and bite off more than you can chew and just explore the consequences of that. I thought that was really cool, and I think that you guys would enjoy that too. So I hope you enjoyed listening to this dissection of a very long and intricate novel. And also, sometimes take a chance on the cover. You gotta judge a book by its cover sometimes. Anyways, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time on another episode of Deckled Edges. I have a lot more lined up because I've been reading a lot, and all of these are super interesting, super fresh books that may not be on your radar yet, and I think you will really enjoy them. I'll leave you with these final words. As always, to sleep in a sea of stars is one of the most profound things that you can do, and maybe one day we'll uncover why the meaning of life is 42. I hope you all have a great day, evening, or night. Bye!